Thank you so much for tuning in as I'm joined by my panel, as it's been for this week. It's made up of Mazola, Molefe, I've got Velile, Mnyandu, and Jonty all joining me right now as we dissect what's been happening in the news cycle as far as local football is concerned. Earlier on the week, we touched on the fact that there would be a big meeting regarding the future of local football as far as the lockdown and COVID-19 is concerned. And then on top of that, just breaking today is the fact that Ben Motswari from Orlando Pirates has been, pretty much caught with a virus, I guess. So he's going to be quarantined and further tests will be done. Apparently he's asymptomatic at the moment. But yeah, gentlemen, a lot to digest and a lot to munch on. Let's start with the person who called in first and essentially put their hand up first, Mazola. Let's start with you, Ben Motswari. Of course he's going to survive, but what does this do in terms of like the knock-on effect and the worry it might, that may creep into some of the decision-making that we're still awaiting on?
To be honest, I don't think it changes much in terms of, the exco heading into that meeting this morning. I'm pretty sure that. Especially the chairman, Ivan Kos, that was also the chairman of Orlando Pirates, would have been well aware. And when you are compiling a report, when you've taken over 40 days to compile a report, having given the task team a mandate to ensure ways in which football can return behind closed doors, you do factor in the fact that players are also human beings, and one of them or several of them, 30 or 100 of them, could potentially be tested positive with COVID-19. So, I don't necessarily think, some might argue it's a game changer. I mean, the timing is definitely, not what they would have wanted. Heading into a meeting in the morning and on the same day, there's a first confirmed case in the PSL, and it's especially from a club as big as Orlando Pirates, but I don't think it in the bigger scheme of things it affects the discussions, because they would have been planning around what happens if a player contracts the virus. Is the player quarantined while others continue? Because it's happened. We've seen it with clubs in Europe or with leagues in Europe that are going back to playing. As before we started, we were talking about the German Bundesliga. We know Italy, which has been the epicenter of this virus in Europe. Players are going back to training. Some are being quarantined for the next 14 days before they can join their teammates. Yeah. Others we've seen images, we've seen videos of them starting to train. We've seen videos and images of them driving into the parking lot and beginning sort of trying to go back to normal again. So, as I've said earlier, yes, the timing, is not great. That this confirmation comes at a time when they are making such a crucial decision, but I think they would have factored this in.
Yeah, I mean, Veli, we've seen a player who plays for a team with also a black and white kit, only just now in Paulo Dybala recover from, being diagnosed with coronavirus. That was 11 March, and only now has he tested negative. This is possibly, this is an injury of season-ending proportions, you would think, for Ben Motswari, because just looking at that time, and if we're going to play any football in that time, he's done.
Yeah, well, I think with Dybala, it was really something else, because I think he's tested positive 4 times for coronavirus. He recovers, then he tests positive again. But also, he's at a place in Italy, which is the epicenter of this thing, Well, with Ben Motswari, look...
He's not staying at home, Dybala.
Clearly, but with, I guess with Ben Motswari, it's also a reflection that footballers are also part of the society, and this thing is affecting everyone. And also with footballers. That's why I've heard that in England, they are even thinking of treating as a World Cup tournament where the players will be in camp and they will not be going back home after the games. Because yes, like in the Bundesliga they are doing, you can't be testing everyone. And out of everyone they tested, they found about 30 people who were positive. But then what do you do after the game? Because they go to the game, they're negative, but then after the game, they go back, So I also think it's this thing of Ben Motswari, it also strengthened the case
Yes.
for players to be tested and to make sure that there's that consistency as well. And I think even if the PSL today decides that they are going to play, I don't think it's a decision that is based on they're going to play this month or even next month, And maybe they can say towards the end of June or in July, when maybe we would have flattened the curve by then. You'll never know, because I think what is important is that CAF in fact, FIFA has given the leagues a deadline of until August to make sure they finish their leagues. So one of the issues that I feel here, because look, it's very interesting because Ben is coming from the club's chairman, and obviously the decision to even go public about this, it is not a decision that it would just been taken by people who are in charge of the media team. It would have been coming from higher up, because it's also important that what Paris did today, to go public with this kind of information, to show the people that this thing can happen to anyone. It can also happen to your stars, And also, as much as today is a crucial day where a crucial decision has to be made, but this kind of information has to come out to say, even if they are saying they are going to continue to play, but they are not in a rush. And as and when they decide to play, these are the measures that will have to be taken.
Okay, Jonty, I mean, looking at the situation as it is, we have to hope that Ben Motswari has not come into contact with any of his teammates and that he's been observing the lockdown rules, so that hopefully this is a contained issue. But what happens if we find out that 3 or 4 Orlando Pirates players have this? I mean, it obviously casts the net wider as far as the reach of the problem would be.
Yeah, it does. I mean, obviously Pirates would have to take precautionary measures and test, and Ben Motswari will have to be honest about who he's been in contact with in the last few weeks.
Right.
And then he'll have to test everyone that he has been in contact with, and then from there can establish whether it's more of a serious problem. One player getting coronavirus and hopefully obviously recovering from it, which looks like they're saying already he's not showing any symptoms, so it looks like he's on the way to recovering from it already. It's not a huge problem. I mean, I was listening to the gentleman and they were talking about the Bundesliga. I know that just after the Bundesliga decided they wanted to play again, I think about 3 players from SC Köln were tested positive, but it's only really delayed the start of the Bundesliga season by about a week. So I think that as Velile mentioned, it's the testing, because if you can get everyone tested, I mean, hypothetically, if Ben Motswari turned up at a game, or someone turned up at a game and they tested positive for the virus outside the stadium, they wouldn't be allowed within the stadium, So that's the only way you can really manage the situation if you want to play football is to kind of test everyone before they go into the ground. And that's going to be interesting to see whether we can do that. But for me, that's the only way you can play. You have to have really, really, really stringent testing procedures like they have presumably organized or seem to have organized with the Bundesliga.
I mean, what then, gents? Because what happens if you do the testing and you find out that 3 or 4 regulars have this thing, and then the calendar is set to kick back in? I mean, our teams are then going to have to just get other players to replace them. What then? What happens if we find out that through that testing, teammates and parts or players that were going to take part are infected?
I think you probably treat it as an injury, as you would an injury. I know it's the dynamics around it are a lot more serious than that. You know, but it's essentially if the resolution is to continue and play behind closed doors, then you have no choice but to treat it as an injury. For instance, Pirates would say, look, we just as it could happen that you lose Ben for the rest of the season because he's got a broken ankle. You lose Ben for the remainder of the games because he's tested positive for COVID-19. I would think that that's quite possibly the idea, because otherwise then clubs can then simply willy-nilly argue that we've been crippled because we don't have two of our best players because they've tested positive for the virus, therefore we cannot play. Which when you've had situations, for instance, in the past when we've heard Pitso talking about having a hospital ward in his team, not having Dennis Onyango, Anele Ngonga, Andile Jali, or Mauricio Afonso, but he soldiers on without 5 or 4 key players. So I would think it would be treated similarly. Otherwise, then what is the point of taking as a resolution to play behind closed doors if when there are positive cases, then the league is halted again? You've got to. You can't sit on the fence. You have to take a decision to say, if we go ahead, if players test positive, we treat it as an injury, and those that you have in your squad, you carry on with things as they are.
When Mazola makes the point about points, Veli, what was the point of today's meeting then? If in the end, the direction and the guidance is going to come from the government when they come down with the lockdown levels, we've all asked for clarity and a way forward, but knowing that the government hasn't come forward with any more as far as the lockdown levels are concerned for now, and them meeting today, what is the best that we can hope for? Because it seems like they're going to be dealing with hypotheticals as well, because we don't know the future. Or do you think as a committee, they would have some insight as to how these things are going to play out in the coming weeks?
Yeah, you will recall that the Ministry of Sport had asked, sports federations,
right.
Sports federations to come forward with their requests and also submissions in terms of what they would be proposing.
Okay.
And we know that from the side of golf and also tennis, they've already made their submissions. And part of their argument is that golf and tennis are non-contact sport. And they can also have measures in terms of how to make sure that they observe all the measures which have been put out there by Department of Health. And also that I think even with the government now, as much as they are doing everything to make sure that they are combating the issue of COVID-19, but also they are trying to open up the economy. And professional sport forms part of that as well. And football, especially the PSL, seems to be they've been having some fruitful discussions in recent weeks with the Ministry of Sport. And you will also recall that just before, during the national disaster period, and also just before the lockdown in March, we attended a BOG meeting, which was also attended by the Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Patla. And also it was already in that meeting where he told us after his presentation that as the Department of Health, they are prepared to help the PSL to find a solution on how best they can certify themselves in terms of maybe getting to play. So I think the meeting today is mainly to rubber stamp the decision or the recommendations of the task team. And also you'll recall that last week CAF also sent out a deadline, which was this past Tuesday, where they were expecting all the leagues on the continent to have submitted in terms of their plans on what they are going to do. So I think the PSL is still within that deadline. So look, today PSL has to come out with a decision, because already there's a deadline that has been set by CAF. And also they have to give the minister ammunition before he goes to the National Command Council of government around this COVID-19 thing. So before he goes out there and motivate on their behalf, they should give him all the ammunition, So it's not really a decision to say we are going to play as from this. It's for them to inform CAF about their plans, and then wait for the minister to go to the National Command Council with what they are recommending or what they are proposing.
Okay. Jonty, I mean, FIFA have extended that deadline for the leagues all over the world to be done by a month, which means that, the end of July is when they expected things
to. Just before Jonty comes in,
Yeah.
I think it's also important because FIFA, this thing is in the documents of FIFA around the issue of when the leagues can come back. It's there in that COVID-19 FIFA working group document that the final arbiter to this thing is not FIFA. It is the government.
It's the government.
Right. But in terms of the deadlines for the seasons to have wrapped up, whose decision is that? On FIFA saying that you have to wrap up by July, still listen to what your government says.
I think by I think by the 2nd of August.
Yeah.
I'm looking at an article here that says FIFA extended the deadline for the 2019-20 season, which was supposed to end by June 30th by a month, as reported in Sowetan Live. Are you saying that isn't correct?
I'm telling you, 2nd of August.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the document says the 2nd. I mean, I think it's because the chairman Ivan Khoza mentioned the 31st of July, but it extends beyond that. I mean, it's much of a muchness. It's just a couple of days. 31 July, 2nd August. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're splitting hairs. We are. Okay. Let's keep it moving to the next topic at hand. And of course, this is coming more and more in the spotlight. We've seen Steenberg FC apparently have struggled to pay salaries this week, joining the likes of Real Kings, Cape Umoya United, Royal Eagles, and Chakuma in the Glad Africa Championship. This is going to be happening, but it's also now extending to the likes of Cape Town City, who have paid full salaries, but are saying that it's going to get tougher and they're going to start cutting salaries back, even up to the tune of 100%, Jonty.
I mean, I think this is just football representing the rest of the economy at the moment. I mean, there are businesses going bust left, right, and centre. And football clubs are naturally feeling the brunt as well. And so obviously salaries are going to be cut at certain clubs, and it's going to have to happen. And Cape Town City's one, Cape Umoya United, Steenberg, Amazulu. It's happening all over. And I think at some point also you have to say, you've got to get the economy going again, and as difficult as it is with with the virus and things, I think that's why people are kind of pushing to get the season started as quickly as possible, because this is there's real damage being done to the economy and real damage being done to football just while we're sitting here. And I think it's sad, but it's an inevitability really that businesses, for them to sustain themselves, they're kind of having to cut players' wages. And I think that is going to only there's only going to be more and more clubs doing that the longer we're in this situation.
Let's talk to that. Let's talk to the economics, because you're right. I mean, you bring up an interesting point here. The economics are, we go back to football, people can earn. And then the other side of the coin is that we get to a resolution, people won't earn and might earn when the season's supposed to come back in August. So how do you balance the need to kind of recover income from the missed out periods with the fact that, listen, we can actually just kind of settle the league and then start again in August when it's meant to, right? There's two considerations there. There's the economics part of it, that if we go back, it's to make money, or the other that says if we don't go back and find another solution, we can buy ourselves time to start the season fresh and proper. Where should the balance lie? I mean, that's the tricky decision I'm guessing administrators have to make.
Look, I think the board of governors has, they've made it clear what they prefer. I think they've, almost, all of them. I doubt maybe there might have been one or two that were saying it's fine to declare the season null and void or whatever. But, from speaking to and I think, between the three of us, we've spoken to so many club bosses and and officials about this, and I think the stance is that they want to go back. Because if you don't go back and you say, okay, declare it null and void and start again next season and look to recuperate your losses, then the reality is that that's not possible. You know, at that time you've already lost so much that you're gonna have your backs against the wall trying to recuperate what you've lost. If you go back now, some of the deals that were in place, maybe kick in again. I mean, advertising, activations, and sort of revenue streams have been brought to a halt. If you say null and void, we pick up again in August, then that you again have to tally the numbers, and you're counting the cost now of millions of rands that have gone down the drain. But if you do go back behind closed doors and compress the season for the next campaign, then you're kind of trying to strike a balance where you're hoping to break even though the financial pinch has already been felt, because so many clubs now have started to cut salaries and implement salary cuts.
Okay, and really, do you think that the sponsors would be on board with that, knowing that they're not going to get maximum ROI, but in the interest of the greater good, just to see the season through without hitting targets that were probably set before in terms of what they're getting from these clubs?
I think that one is very interesting, because if you remember, at some stage there was even talk that this could be the last season for ABSA. And also now you never know what is going to happen. Are they still there next season? Would this be the right way for them to part with the league if they are parting with the league? So all those questions come up as well. And also spare a thought for a company like Nedbank. They are in the middle of their cup competition. They are left with only 3 games, 2 semi-finals and the final. And obviously they want their shine, So what happens in this case? That's why for me, I know that there's about 7 to 8 leagues on the continent that have declared their season null and void. But let's zoom in on those leagues. What type of leagues are those?
Don't go there, Velile.
Are they the top leagues on the continent?
Exactly.
The Botola Pro League.
Mediocre leagues.
We've not seen the Premier League in Egypt coming up as well. We've not had anything. Also, we've seen what in the DRC, they have not even finalized the decision yet, where TP Mazembe and AS Vita are. I mean, most of the North African leagues, they have not come up with. In fact, I've read, in fact, that most of the North African leagues, especially in Algeria, in Morocco, in Egypt, I think also in Tunisia, that they want to finish their seasons. And when you look on paper, those leagues are similar to the PSL. And also, I think there's that dicey situation as well, even in Zambia as well. So let's not be. let's look. Yes, I know. I mean,
let's look at the caliber of the leagues that have been
declared
null and void.
Okay.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
Because
no, I think that's a good point, though. Because if you look at also, you can compare it to Europe a bit and say that the Dutch league and the Belgian league in Europe,
exactly,
the top leagues in Europe, Premier League are desperate to finish. La Liga are desperate to finish. And
Serie A, desperate. Serie A, the epicenter, is desperate to finish.
Ground zero.
One of the top
Ground zero.
I mean, I read today that besides just the football teams in Germany now, I think the chancellor, she's given sports clubs the right to go back and train.
Right.
Sports clubs. So you could but one maybe can argue that in Europe they are heading towards summer.
Yes.
And then the difference with us And also, even in North Africa, they're heading towards summer. The difference with us is that we are still, like Jonty said last week, we are still to be at our peak for this,
Right.
So we're going to winter. But look, I don't think, like Mazola said earlier, I think most of these club bosses, they want to go back and play behind closed doors. Obviously, I think now there's only one way it can happen. It want to be behind closed doors. But I don't think it can be something that is going to happen this month, and not even early next month, but maybe towards the end of June or early in July.
Jonty, I was speaking to Coach Hlonola Siema, and he brought up a good point that as Bloemfontein Celtic, they travel a lot as far as for their matches. There's no neighbors now because there's no Free State Stars anymore. And so with that considered, how do you see a team like them like being considered for what happens after, like when you take their situation into consideration?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the travel, I think that's why the argument of having
camping somewhere
camp is very prudent, because you take all the teams and you put them in an isolated environment, if you like, and you have testing so that that in that environment there isn't the virus, and then you kind of create a situation where you can play games at a certain venue. I'm not sure you can do it any other way at the moment because of the travel between provinces, because of what you mentioned. I mean, our teams are really geographically separated by long distances, and it'd be difficult for them to constantly have to jump between provinces, and especially in the current in the current rules, they simply can't do it under lockdown level 4. It's just, you can't do it at all. So I think that's why the Premier League, I think, are looking at that situation of having one venue or only a few venues, and similarly with the PSL, I think you've got to look at just certain stadiums, and for a team like Celtic, they'd have to come. Maybe they'd only have to travel to one venue, rather than having to go all over the place.
It might be a logistical nightmare, because if you're a team in Cape Town and needs to be in Joburg and there's no flights, what is that? That's a bus. Like, how do you social distance that?
And I think that's also why the ExCo needs to meet, because there's a 40-page report. It needs to go through all of this. I mean, it was explained to me as being so detailed. It went so far as what to do with the players' toenails. But the kind of that was obviously a metaphor. But hopefully it's a really detailed report that layers out all of this, and it needed to be run by the entire ExCo so it could get the approval of the ExCo. Next step is to take it to government. Government needs to obviously approve it. I mean, I think what you've got at the moment is a sport like golf, which has already presented, but golf is such a naturally self-isolating sport that it's much easier to run a golf tournament with no crowd, whereas you could almost do that tomorrow on some level, and it is to do with football. So, and then tennis and things like that, those sports will start coming back before football, I would think, in this country. But somewhere down the line, I hope this year, I know I've not been necessarily very optimistic, but I do hope that it comes back somewhere along the line this year, even if it's obviously now got to come back. 2019-20 has to come back before August 2nd, and a long time before August 2nd if you're going to get all the games in. So
for sure,
hopefully in June, as Velile mentioned, or mid-June, we can.
Well, also I think also the fact that the Olympics have been postponed, kind of gives them 2 weeks back or something like that. Because I think the 2020-21 season was always going to start later than usual anyway because of the Olympics. So I think by virtue of the Olympics being postponed, that then also kind of buys them. It's not a lot of time, because obviously there's so much time lost through all of this, but it does give them 2 weeks to also kind of play with. And to Gavin Hunt's point earlier in the week, players have already been at home for so long that I don't think they would mind if they just get on with it, like finish the season and then like hit the ground running and get on with it and plan for next season, because already you've been sitting at home for what, 41
days.
41 days.
Even the normal preseason
is not that long.
You don't sit at home for that long. You don't sit at home for that long.
I mean,
no, for sure.
If you consider that the season ends around the 20th of May, and teams are at home for less than a month. Maybe at most it's going to be 4 weeks. It hardly goes beyond 5 weeks.
Right.
And then they start with the preseason, and then in the first week of August, they start a new season. So already, we're way beyond that.
Finish the season on Friday, start a new season next Monday.
Next weekend, yes. It'll be a very...
you just jump 1 week. You just jump 1 week, because I've also heard that, you remember, even with the CAF Champions League, we had a time where they had, they started from September, and then they were finishing in May, when there was that transitional season. So I think that's what they're planning to do, even with the next Champions League season. So, look, it's going to be very unusual. One of the things I don't see continuing is also the AFCON next year. And I think they could be forced to push the AFCON back. But I'm not sure if
you see, that's the other thing. Then you get your FIFA weeks back as well. So that gives you
time to catch up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
to catch up.
From what I had heard is that they might not have the FIFA weeks back this year, so that they can finish and also they can start.
Yeah.
But then what that means is that the AFCON is supposed to be in January. In 2020.
That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. There's 4
announced officially, but you can pretty much guarantee that's not going to happen. I mean, you can't travel internationally by air at the moment, really, to other places or places. So how are you going to play? It's impossible.
Exactly.
That's true.
But also, I think this also comes back to CAF Champions League and CAF Confed as well, because South Africa and Zambia and maybe other countries. Yes, let's say maybe they will open their airspace and say, okay, international travel is back. But what if in Rwanda, in Burundi, in Burkina Faso, some other countries in West Africa, North Africa, they are still not
ready,
open their space in terms of international travel. So it means that you cannot start qualifiers or even inter-club competitions when there are countries
ready,
which are not back in international travel. So now we're just going to concentrate on the domestic leagues.
Yeah, let's wait and see what happens with this report. Mazola, very quickly, we're running out of time. Pitso Mosimane, any clarity as to his contract situation?
Yeah, obviously, I think an announcement is probably imminent soon. But in Sundowns language, soon could be a month from now, could be 2 months from now. You don't know. But what I've been told is that the coach will stay on. He signed a contract believed to be at least three more years at Mamelodi Sundowns, which would be phenomenal, because that means Pitso would complete a decade at Mamelodi Sundowns. Unheard of. It goes back to Patrice Motsepe's statement that he wants him to be Alex Ferguson of Mamelodi Sundowns, and if he's been given another long-term contract, I mean, it's phenomenal what Pitso has done at Sundowns. 9 trophies in 7 years, and then to be able to then complete a full 10 years at one club. That's unheard of. That's unprecedented, especially in anywhere else in the world, but especially in South African football. So, but look, I wouldn't expect an announcement anytime soon, given that it's Mamelodi Sundowns. But yeah, from my understanding, it's a done deal.
Okay, and Jonty, that would somehow go to appeasing all the whispers of the tensions between Pitso and the Spanish contingent. It seems that if he's going to continue, he probably has gotten his way and is going to work in an environment that's conducive to him.
Yeah, it means that there's some sort of compromise has been reached. I think the situation at the moment is not really conducive to coaches changing jobs anyway, even if they wanted to. So I think it's a good thing for Sundowns and a good thing for him. I mean, he's won everything. Maybe for him, I have been saying before, maybe he wants a different challenge. But for now, I think he can put a Alex Ferguson like legacy there at Sundowns in and be like he's already a club legend. He can just carry that on. In 2 years. I mean, imagine if he wins another couple of Champions Leagues. That would be pretty epic.
Well, that's something to look forward to. The upshots is that we might have a few more years of quality football coming out of the Brazilians. Gents, thank you so much for your time and for your impressions. We're done and dusted as far as the Zoom call is concerned. Keeping it to 40 minutes so that our listeners can have some bite-sized entertainment. Thank you so much. We'll catch up again in the new week. Have a good one. Look after yourselves. I'll see you next week on Monday. Cheers.